It starts quietly. No dramatic thunder. No flashing red light. Just a voice in your head. The one that says, "You should have done better," or "They're all judging you." You've heard it for so long that you stop questioning it. You assume it's you, your brain, your truth, your reality. But what if it's not? What if the most dangerous lies aren't the ones the world tells you, but the ones your mind whispers in your own voice? You wake up each morning already in conversation with yourself. Before your feet touch the floor, the voice begins. Sometimes it's gentle, reminding you to get moving, to keep going. But often, it's something else subtle, sharp, familiar. You're falling behind. You're not as good as them. What if you fail again? These thoughts don't shout. They echo, bouncing off the walls of your mind until they sound like truth. You rarely stop to ask, where did that come from? Because who questions their own thoughts? But here's the truth no one talks about. 80% of your self-talk isn't new. It's recycled. Your brain plays old recordings, fragment of fears and judgments you picked up years ago. A teacher's disapproval, a parent's disappointment, a friend's betrayal. The tone changes, but the message stays the same. Your mind becomes a looping narrator, repeating old stories in a new voice. The one you trust most, your own. You see it in everyone. The student staring at a blank page, convinced she's not smart enough. The father who works himself to exhaustion, terrified of being called a failure. The artist who hides his work, afraid no one will understand it. They each carry a voice too, invisible, untraceable, relentless. And like you, they believe it, because the mind is convincing. It knows your weaknesses, your patterns, your pressure points. It whispers not to deceive you, but to keep you safe. Safety, that's the trick. You were built to survive, not to thrive. That's biology's design. Your brain would rather trap you in the familiar than risk the unknown. It paints comfort as wisdom, hesitation as logic, fear as foresight. Don't try that. You'll just get hurt. Stay here, at least it's safe. Every lie is wrapped in protection. And the more you listen, the smaller your world becomes, until comfort becomes a cage disguised as peace. Then one day, you catch it mid-sentence. Maybe during a quiet drive or a sleepless night, you realize something. This thought doesn't belong here. It doesn't fit your present life. You're not that scared child anymore. You're not standing in that old classroom, hearing that old criticism. Yet the voice repeats as if time never moved. That's when it hits you. Your mind isn't always speaking from the present. Sometimes it's just echoing the past. That realization cracks something open. For the first time, you start to observe your thoughts instead of obeying them. You notice how they twist and turn, how fear dresses itself as logic. You notice that for every cruel whisper, there's a pattern, a trigger, a memory, a moment you never questioned. You realize that your brain doesn't lie to destroy you. It lies to protect the version of you that once needed those lies to survive. The fear of failure once kept you cautious. The doubt once kept you safe from rejection. But now, those same lies keep you from growing. You start to listen differently. Not every voice deserves your trust. Not every thought deserves your belief. You begin to separate the noise from the truth, the past from the present. And in that separation, something shifts. The silence between thoughts feels wider, calmer. For the first time, you see the voice not as truth, but as habit, an old defense mechanism doing its best to guard you from pain. You thank it, and then you let it go, because the moment you see your mind's lies for what they are, protective illusions, they lose their power. You stop being the prisoner of your thoughts and become the observer of them. You no longer drown in the noise. You stand above it, and in that stillness, you find something your brain has hidden for years: choice. You can listen or you can lead. But as that thought settles, a deeper question rises, one that lingers like a shadow at the edge of awareness. If your thoughts aren't always facts, then who's really in control? It's strange how vividly the past can haunt you, the way a single memory can still make your chest tighten, even years later. You tell yourself it's the truth, that it happened exactly as you remember it. But what if it didn't? What if the past you keep replaying isn't a documentary, but a movie, one your brain quietly edits every time you hit play? Because here's the unsettling truth. Your memories lie, not out of malice, but survival. Alex used to believe he remembered everything clearly. The words, the tone, the moment it all fell apart. He could still see his best friend standing in that coffee shop, arms crossed, face cold. He remembered the sting in his chest when she said, "I don't care anymore." That was a line that ended their friendship, the one that built the story he carried for years. That people always leave, that caring too much only leads to pain. But one night, while scrolling through old messages, Alex found something strange. A conversation he'd forgotten. She hadn't said, "I don't care anymore." She had said, "I don't know how to care anymore." A single word changed everything. It wasn't rejection, it was exhaustion. But in the heat of the moment, his mind had rewritten it. And over time, that edited version became his truth. You might think memory is like a file, stored somewhere, waiting to be opened exactly as it was saved. But it's not. It's more like a living story, rewritten every time you remember it. Each recall is an act of reconstruction, not playback. Every emotion, every bias, every current feeling seeps into the past you're trying to revisit. The angry you remember is anger. The lonely you remember is abandonment. The hopeful you suddenly recalls kindness you once overlooked. Your brain does this to protect you. It simplifies chaos into clarity. It cuts scenes, changes lighting, alters dialogue. Anything to make the story easier to live with. That's why two people can live through the same event, but remember entirely different stories. One remembers betrayal. The other remembers confusion. Both are true to the brain that holds them. In Alex's mind, the memory of that day had grown darker over time. The cafe became colder, the silence heavier, her words sharper. Every retelling fed his anger, reinforcing the belief that she had wronged him. But now, reading the real messages, he felt a sudden dissonance, as if the ground beneath his emotions had cracked. If this memory wasn't accurate, how many others weren't? He started remembering the months before that fight. The missed calls, the distant texts, the sadness he'd ignored in her eyes. Suddenly, the narrative shifted. Maybe she hadn't left. Maybe she'd been reaching out. And he hadn't heard her. The story he'd lived with for years began to unravel, revealing something more complicated, more human, and far more painful. Scientists call this memory reconsolidation. Every time you recall a memory, it becomes flexible, like wet clay. You mold it, even without meaning to. A smell, a song, or your mood that day can reshape what you remember. The brain isn't lying to hurt you. It's trying to make sense of who you are now in relation to who you were then. It updates the story to fit your current identity. But that survival mechanism comes at a cost. You might forget the moments of kindness in someone who hurt you. You might exaggerate your mistakes to justify your guilt. Or you might romanticize a toxic love just to feel less alone. The stories you carry shape your identity, even when they're built on false recollections. Your brain edits for comfort, but the edited version often keeps you trapped. Alex sat there, staring at his phone, feeling his anger dissolve into something harder to face. Regret. Not because of what she said, but because of how his memory had twisted it. All those years of resentment, the walls he built to protect himself, were based on a scene that never truly happened. It wasn't betrayal that scarred him. It was his brain's attempt to make sense of emotional chaos. You can almost hear it now in your own head. That conversation you replay when you can't sleep. The argument you wish went differently. The apology you never got. What if parts of it aren't true? What if every time you remembered it, you changed the lines just enough to protect your heart or to justify your pain? The realization is both freeing and terrifying, because if your past can be edited, it means your suffering isn't always what it seems. But it also means you've built parts of yourself on foundations that might not exist. The question lingers like a chill. If your past can lie to you, how do you ever trust yourself again? Your brain doesn't want happiness. It wants safety. It doesn't care if you're thriving, fulfilled, or free. It only cares that you're alive. That's why so many of us stay where we hurt. We tell ourselves stories that make the cage feel like home. We call it loyalty, responsibility, stability. But often, it's just fear disguised as logic. Maya sat at her desk under the white glow of a computer screen that never seemed to rest. Every day looked the same. The same weak coffee, the same dry reports, the same polite smiles that never reached the eyes. She told herself she should be grateful. At least I have a job, she'd whisper on the train home, her reflection tired but familiar. At least I know how this pain feels. There was a strange comfort in predictability, in knowing what tomorrow would bring, even if it was nothing new. We've all been there, haven't we? Staying in relationships that drain us because at least we're not alone. Holding on to routines that suffocate us because at least they're stable. It's not weakness, it's wiring. The brain has one primal instruction: avoid danger. And to the brain, danger isn't defined by what's harmful, it's defined by what's unknown. See, your brain doesn't register toxic job or unfulfilling life. It only registers predictable pattern. If you felt anxiety long enough, your brain will label anxiety as normal. If you've lived in scarcity, it will label struggle as safe. This is why breaking cycles feels terrifying, not because change is bad, but because familiarity feels like survival. Around the 2-minute mark in every story like Maya's, something inside starts to whisper, there has to be more than this. But the moment that voice rises, the brain fires back louder. Stay. Don't risk it. What if you fail? What if it gets worse? That's not intuition. That's biology. The amygdala, the fear center of your brain, can't tell the difference between a tiger and a tough conversation, between starting over and stepping off a cliff. To it, uncertainty equals danger. And dopamine, that sweet molecule we chase, doesn't care about meaning either. It rewards familiarity, not fulfillment. You get a small dopamine hit every time you repeat the same loop because your brain loves patterns. It sees repetition as control and control as safety. Over time, that loop becomes a chemical addiction, not to pleasure, but to predictability. Maya's turning point came quietly, like most do. She sat in a meeting, nodding through words she didn't care about, feeling her chest tighten. She imagined herself 10 years older, still in this chair, still saying, it's fine. But something about that image broke her. The safety she once clung to suddenly felt like a coffin. The thought of staying became heavier than the fear of leaving. There's a moment like that for everyone, when the illusion of comfort cracks. You realize that safe has become another word for stuck. You see how your brain built a small, familiar world around you, convincing you it's all you can handle. And then, the truth lands at a quiet thunderclap. The pain you know isn't safer than the unknown. It's just easier to justify. We rationalize it constantly. At least I know how this pain feels. At least I can handle this. But the at least is the language of survival, not growth. It's the brain whispering, don't move, we might die out there. And so we trade our dreams for routine, our peace for predictability, our potential for comfort. But comfort is a contract. Your brain signs it in dopamine and fear. It promises safety but charges you freedom. And for a while, that trade feels worth it. Until one day, you wake up and realize safety isn't peace. It's numbness, that you've outgrown the walls your mind built for you. When Maya finally walked out of that office, it wasn't dramatic. No grand speech, no applause. Just a quiet step into uncertainty. Her heart raced, her hands shook. But for the first time in years, she felt alive. Because real safety doesn't come from avoiding danger. It comes from trusting yourself to face it. And maybe that's the most beautiful lie your brain ever told. That safety means staying still. Because the truth is, growth is dangerous. But so is pretending you're fine when your soul is suffocating. So ask yourself, are you safe or just familiar? Because sometimes what you call safety is just the most beautiful lie your brain ever told. Fear is not a warning. It's a prediction your brain refuses to let go of. It's the echo of something that once kept you alive, now playing on repeat long after the danger is gone. You feel it before you think it. The tightening in your chest, the shallow breath, the quickening pulse. It's your brain whispering, don't risk it. Remember what happened last time? It's strange how fear can feel so certain, so real, even when nothing's actually happening. You're standing in a meeting, your heart pounding as if you're being chased. You're about to hit send on an email that could change everything. And suddenly your mind flashes every possible way it could go wrong. Your body freezes before your thoughts can even form a sentence. That's because fear doesn't start in the mind. It starts in the body. It's not a conscious choice. It's a reaction written deep into your nervous system. Every time you hesitated before taking a chance, every time you pulled back from something new, your brain wasn't seeing danger. It was remembering it. Somewhere in your past, you took a leap and fell. Maybe you failed publicly. Maybe you got rejected. Maybe someone you trusted hurt you. And in that moment, your brain made a note. This kind of thing equals pain. Don't do it again. That's all fear really is. Memory dressed up as instinct. Inside your brain, a small almond-shaped structure called the amygdala runs the show. It scans every situation, every tone of voice, every uncertain moment, asking only one question. Have we seen this before? And if it finds even a trace of resemblance to something painful, it floods your body with alarms. Cortisol, adrenaline, the rush that makes your stomach twist. But the amygdala doesn't care if the situation has changed. It doesn't update the file. It just plays the old warning again and again. That's why people freeze right before success. Why a confident speaker's voice trembles before walking on stage. Why a diver hesitates at the edge of the platform. Why a teenager, hand hovering over the submit button for a scholarship, suddenly thinks, I'm not good enough. The body remembers. The brain protects. But protection doesn't always equal truth. Halfway through every moment of fear, there's a split second where time slows down. You can almost hear it. The whisper of your old self, still trapped in that original wound. Don't do it. It hurt last time. The fear feels present, but it's actually past. It's not a prediction of what's coming. It's a replay of what once was. And that's the lie the brain tells best. That fear equals fact. It doesn't. Fear isn't a map. It's an old photograph. It shows you where you've been, not where you're going. But because it's vivid, because your heart races and your body believes, you mistake it for truth. You tell yourself, this must mean something. And in a way, it does. It means your brain is still trying to keep you safe using yesterday's logic. The turning point comes when you realize that fear doesn't vanish with courage. It quiets with understanding. Once you see it not as prophecy, but as pattern, the spell breaks. You begin to notice that the fear shows up most when you're closest to growth. When you're about to say something honest. When you're about to leave comfort behind. That's when the brain panics, screaming to keep the familiar alive. Fear wants control. It thrives on prediction. But life, real life, doesn't follow the brain's old scripts. You are no longer the child who was humiliated. No longer the person who failed once and built a cage around it. You are here now, breathing through echoes that no longer match your reality. And in that realization, something shifts. The heartbeat slows. The breath steadies. You understand that fear is not a message to obey, but a memory to observe. You can look in the eye and say, thank you for trying to protect me, but I'm safe now. That's the climax of every fear story. The moment you stop believing that anxiety equals danger. You begin to walk into uncertainty, not because you're fearless, but because you know fear's language now. You recognize it as a safety mechanism, outdated, overprotective, but never evil. The speaker steps onto the stage. The diver leaps. The teenager presses submit. The moment is the same. Fear doesn't disappear. It just loses its authority. And that's the question that lingers as silence follows a heartbeat. If fear isn't truth, then what else have you been believing? You think you're being rational. You're not. You're being emotional in disguise. You call it logic because it feels clean, controlled, and intelligent. But behind every logical argument, there's something softer, something trembling beneath the surface, a feeling you don't want to admit. Fear, pride, shame, the quiet need to be right, to feel safe, to not look foolish. Logic is the armor emotion wears when it wants to sound smart. You tell yourself, I'm just being realistic. Or, I know what I saw. But even those words carry the tremor of something deeper, the desperate need for your version of reality to stay intact. Meet Ethan. He's scrolling through another late-night debate on social media, convinced he's the voice of reason among emotional fools. His fingers type with precision, his tone calm but cutting. He posts charts, studies, and long explanations that end with, "Facts don't care about your feelings." But the truth is, Ethan's facts do care about his feelings. They're chosen by them. Every study he quotes supports what he already believes. Every argument he dismisses threatens something personal, his sense of control, his certainty, his identity. That's the quiet irony. Logic in the hands of emotion becomes a defense mechanism. It stops being a searchlight and turns into a shield. You've done it too, haven't you? When someone challenges your opinion, your brain doesn't ask, "Is this true?" It asks, "How do I prove I'm not wrong?" You start filtering. You remember every example that supports your side and forget every one that doesn't. You Google selectively. You seek validation that feels like truth because it matches how you already feel. That's not reasoning. That's emotional self-defense dressed as intellect. Midway through the mind's argument with itself, something strange happens. You begin to notice the voice of logic isn't calm at all. It's anxious, restless. It's not saying, "Here's the truth." It's saying, "Please don't let me be wrong." Logic, in this form, doesn't seek clarity. It seeks comfort. And comfort is the emotion reason was meant to challenge. Psychologists call it confirmation bias, the mind's tendency to cherry-pick evidence that supports what it already believes. But it's more than a mental glitch. It's a survival instinct. If your worldview feels threatened, your brain reacts as if you were threatened. Your logical arguments become emotional self-protection, elaborate stories to keep your internal world from collapsing. You might tell yourself, "I'm just looking at the facts." But what you're really doing is choosing facts that don't make you feel small, uncertain, or guilty. The brain isn't trying to be honest. It's trying to keep your identity intact. Ethan keeps debating, convinced the other side just doesn't get it. But the truth is, he doesn't get himself. Every time someone disagrees, he feels an invisible punch to the gut, the sting of being dismissed, misunderstood, or powerless. His words are precise, but his motive isn't reason. It's redemption. He's not fighting for truth. He's fighting for emotional balance. And you do the same thing, quietly. You justify staying in the same relationship because people don't change. You explain not chasing a dream because it's not practical. You defend your habits, your opinions, your choices, not because they're right, but because questioning them would hurt. You think you're being logical. You're just being kind to your fear. There's a painful kind of humility that comes with realizing this, that the mind you trust to think clearly is often your most sophisticated liar. It builds beautiful arguments to protect fragile emotions. It says, "I'm objective," while hiding the trembling heartbeat underneath. But here's the turning point. Once you see the lie, you can stop living inside it. When you start noticing how logic bends under emotion, doubt stops feeling like weakness. It becomes a kind of truth, because doubt doesn't defend, it investigates. It's what logic was meant to do before emotion hijacked it. True intelligence isn't in how fast you can argue or how strong your points sound. It's in how willing you are to admit, "I might be wrong." That's the sentence that terrifies the ego, but frees the mind. Ethan's argument thread ends with silence. No one changes their mind, not even him. But somewhere between his scrolling and his sigh, a quiet thought surfaces. What if I've been arguing to feel right instead of find truth? That's where real logic begins, not in certainty, but in curiosity. The next time you hear yourself say, "I'm just being logical," pause. Ask what emotion your logic is serving. Is it pride? Fear? The need to belong? Because logic without awareness is just emotion pretending to wear a suit. The moment you start to see through that disguise, something remarkable happens. You stop using logic to protect your beliefs and start using it to question them. You stop fighting to win arguments and start searching to understand. That's the real evolution, when intelligence learns humility, when logic stops lying to protect the heart and starts listening to it instead. Because if your logic lies to protect your feelings, how do you ever find truth? You don't see reality as it is. You see it as you feel. Every morning, you wake up and look out at the same world, the same streets, the same faces, the same sky, but it never looks the same twice. Some days it's alive, full of possibility. Other days, it feels like everything is closing in. The world didn't change overnight. You did. Your emotions paint a filter through which you see everything else. You think your eyes show you truth, but they only show you light. It's your feelings that turn light into meaning. You scroll through your phone and see someone's success story. Yesterday, it might have inspired you. Today, it makes you feel small. Why? Because your emotion, not their story, decided what it meant. Why does everything feel heavier lately? You whisper to yourself. The same job, the same people, the same life. But something inside feels gray. It's not the world that's darker. It's the lens. Maya feels it too. Months after leaving her draining job, she expected freedom to taste like sunlight. But some mornings, she still feels trapped, not by her office walls, but by her own mind. Why do I still feel this way? She wonders. The truth is, her body hasn't caught up with her freedom yet. Emotion lags behind reality. It doesn't follow the calendar. And then there's Alex, the friendship he thought betrayed him. He's begun to see it differently now. Memory has softened. He realizes maybe his anger was never about the other person, but about the part of himself that couldn't accept being misunderstood. Emotion was the mirror, not the enemy. Your emotions are not random. They're your body's language, your nervous system's way of saying, something here matters. But when you mistake signals for instructions, that's when you get lost. Anger says, a boundary was crossed. Fear says, something feels uncertain. Sadness says, you've lost something important. But none of them say, stay here forever. That's where we get trapped. When we obey emotions instead of listening to them. You feel anxious, so you avoid. You feel sad, so you isolate. You feel angry, so you push away. You confuse messages for commands. At the core of every emotional storm is a signal, not a sentence. A signal asking for awareness, not reaction. Around the 2-minute mark of realization, something shifts inside you. You see how emotion colors your perception more than your eyes ever could. When you're sad, the world seems distant. When you're joyful, it feels close. The trees don't move closer, you do. Science calls this emotional congruence. Your mind literally adjusts what it notices based on what you feel. You see what matches your mood. It's not delusion, it's design. And maybe that's the greatest paradox. The same system that blinds you in pain can also awaken you through awareness. Maya begins to understand this one quiet evening. She doesn't fight her sadness anymore. She sits with it, not as an enemy, but as a messenger. The moment she stops running, her chest softens. The feeling doesn't vanish, but it transforms. Sadness turns from weight into wisdom. Alex does the same. He rewinds a memory that haunted him for years. The words, the tone, the anger. But now he sees not what happened, but why it hurt. And in that awareness, the memory loses its power. Emotions were never meant to control you. They were meant to connect you, to yourself, to others, to what matters. But only if you learn to look at them, not through them. You start realizing emotions are not the truth, but they point to it. They are not reality, but they shape your experience of it. Like light through colored glass, they can distort or illuminate depending on how aware you are of the tint. And in that awareness, everything begins to shift. You stop asking, why do I feel this way? And start asking, what is this feeling trying to show me? Because emotions don't make you weak. Misunderstanding them does. The goal isn't to suppress or obey them. It's to see through them, to let them pass through you without taking over your sight. You look at the world again, same streets, same faces, same sky, but this time you see more than what your emotions paint. You see the painter too. And in that quiet realization, peace doesn't mean never feeling. It means knowing that feeling isn't the whole truth, just a reflection of it. If emotion can shape reality, maybe awareness can reshape it. Your brain will keep lying, but now you'll see through it. The voices don't vanish overnight. They still whisper. The same doubts, the same fears, the same clever tricks dressed as logic. But something has changed. You're no longer hypnotized by them. You hear the thought, you'll fail again, And instead of believing it, you pause. You breathe, and you see it for what it is. Just a thought, not a prophecy. Freedom was never about silencing your mind. It was about understanding it. You start to notice the pattern. How your mind runs to comfort when you're scared. How it rewrites the past to protect you. How it wraps fear in the language of reason. But instead of fighting it, you start to smile. I see you now, mind, you say, quietly, but I'm not following. The battlefield becomes a classroom. Every lie your brain tells you reveals the same truth. It's trying to keep you safe. Even in its most painful stories, there's love hidden under fear. The voice that says don't risk it is really saying, I don't want to get hurt again. The one that says you're not good enough is just trying to keep you from the sting of rejection. Your brain doesn't hate you. It just doesn't know you've grown. Alex knows this now. The anger that once ruled him feels lighter. When the old memories resurface, he doesn't dive into them. He watches them float by. They still hurt sometimes, but they no longer define him. Maya feels it too. When anxiety knocks on her chest before work, she doesn't hide. She listens. She breathes. And the storm passes faster than it ever did before. Awareness turns to compassion for yourself, for your mind, for the stories that once trapped you. You begin to understand that your thoughts are not enemies to be defeated, but signals to be understood. The mind isn't a liar in the moral sense. It's a storyteller that confuses imagination for protection. And once you realize that, its power to control you dissolves. There's a stillness that follows awareness, not silence, but peace. You no longer need to fix every thought or chase every feeling. You just let them move. You learn to sit in the storm without needing the sky to clear. That's where freedom begins, not in control, but in clarity. At the midpoint of your awakening, you realize something profound. Freedom doesn't come from silence. It comes from understanding. You don't wait for your mind to stop talking. You learn how to listen differently. Thoughts come and go, but you remain. Emotions rise and fade, but awareness stays. You are not your thoughts. You are the space they move through. And as you live from that awareness, everything changes subtly but completely. The same fears visit you, but now they knock instead of breaking in. The same doubts appear, but they echo softer. You still feel sadness, anger, anxiety, but you meet them with curiosity instead of panic. You no longer drown in the waves because you finally remembered you are the ocean, not the storm. Alex, Maya, the student, the parent, the artist, all of them awaken to this same truth in their own quiet ways. Different stories, same realization. The brain still tells its tales, but they no longer control the ending. Humanity, in all its noise and chaos, becomes a little quieter, not because the noise disappears, but because awareness grows louder. There's beauty in that, the kind of beauty that comes when you stop fighting what you are and start understanding it. The brain will always lie in the language of protection, but now you see the meaning behind the words, and that changes everything. You start to live lighter. You stop needing to prove or chase or fix. You begin to trust yourself again, not the stories, but the awareness beneath them. You look at life with open eyes, unfiltered by fear. And even when the mind tries to pull you back, you know now, awareness can't be unlearned. Once you've seen the illusion, you can't fall fully asleep again. This is peace, not the absence of thoughts, but the presence of understanding. The gentle smile that says, "It's okay, mind. I know you're trying to help." So when the next wave of doubt rises, don't fight it. Don't run. Just look at it, see it, name it, and let it pass. The mind will always speak, but you no longer mistake its voice for truth. If this message opened your eyes, share it with someone still trapped in their own thoughts. Because truth spreads one realization at a time.